Howdy. Of course. You're worried about the cicadas. Magic, aren't they? Hey, Katrina, how are you? Great to see you. Yeah. Oh, you happy? But they're loud, aren't they? And it picks up on our feed. Am I using you for an eye line? All I do is I'm told. Oh, no, don't. Look, we work on their time. You guys, you're all happy if we start the press conference? Rob, Steve? David Crisafulli, Brent Mickelberg. Testing 1, 2. I've just been waiting. The LNP is today calling on the state government to release the workforce information for frontline roles, which is now information that is approaching 5 months overdue. This document details the number of frontline staff serving Queenslanders, and let me explain why that matters. It matters because it is vital for Queenslanders to know that those public servants tasked with delivering the things that matter to them are there and are being supported and able to do so. Things like the number of nurses in our hospitals, the number of fireys on the front line, people looking after our natural environment, people dealing with the housing crisis we're experiencing. But today I want to focus on the number of full-time frontline police officers. The last details we have show that between September 2020 and March 2022, which is the most up-to-date information we have, the number of full-time frontline police officers went backwards by 12 in Queenslanders. That's right, despite the surge in population, there are 12 fewer police than there were 18 months before. And Queenslanders deserve to see the latest snapshot from September to know that the government is serious about dealing with what is a youth crime epidemic. So far, we have repeatedly asked for the government to work with us to deal with the youth crime crisis. We've seen no consultation, no legislation, and now we have no police numbers. And I want to explain why this matters. At a time when laws have been weakened, to know that there are fewer police on the front line than 2 years ago, Queenslanders will ask, is it any wonder we're in the middle of a youth crime crisis? We are asking police to do a job with one arm tied behind their back. Fewer police, weaker laws. Is it any wonder we're in the middle of a youth crime epidemic? These are figures that deserve to be in the hands of Queenslanders. These are figures that matter. And today we're calling on the government to be open, to be transparent and release this data so that we can continue to drive the change that's needed in frontline service delivery for Queenslanders. I've asked Brent Mickelberg, the Open Data Shadow, to have a few words.
Thank you. Morning, all. Well, 8 years ago, the Premier was elected on a platform of openness and transparency. She frequently talks about openness and transparency, but the reality does not meet the rhetoric. What we see time and time again with this government is that they seek to hide data. They seek to massage data. They seek to hide behind the facts, and they hide from Queenslanders on information that Queenslanders deserve. And so it is the case with this Queensland public sector workforce profile. An outcome of the 2018, or the presentation of that data is an outcome from the 2018 Coldrake review into the public service. It was an outcome that was delivered by Mr Coldrake because it's important that Queenslanders understand the true state of the public sector. They need to know how many police are serving them, how many doctors, nurses, teachers. This is important information, and it was about holding the government to account for the decisions that they make. Now, what we've seen in this term of government is the number of frontline full-time police decreased by 12. Decreased by 12, against a government commitment that they would increase police numbers by over 1,450 police. The reality is they will not meet that objective by the end of this term, and it is simply not good enough for them to hide that data. They hide the data And they're hiding the data just like they're hiding the Premier right now from Queenslanders. In the middle of a youth crime crisis, the Premier has gone missing in action, and it happens time and time again. It is simply not good enough for the Premier to hide from Queenslanders at this difficult time. We've seen instances right across the state, in almost every single region, in Brisbane and Toowoomba and the Fraser Coast, in Townsville. We've seen time and time again instances where our Queenslanders are suffering at the hands of young criminals. And the Premier needs to act. The Premier needs to front up. The Premier needs to explain the situation. And the first step to doing that would be to release this public sector workforce data report, and then we'd understand the true state of the number of full-time frontline police officers that are serving Queenslanders. Now, this has been released every single year, 6 monthly, so March data, September data, released so Queenslanders can understand. Yet they're hiding it now. And the question has to be asked, why? Is it because we're coming into the Parliament next week to debate laws that should have already been released and circulated so people can understand some of the solutions that the government are proposing? Is it because those numbers are not convenient, that they show a further cut in full-time frontline police officers? It's simply not good enough. Queenslanders deserve to see that data, and I'm calling on the government to release that data today. Queenslanders deserve to know the number of police that are on the beat, keeping them safe. And if there's nothing to hide, the government should be proactively pushing that information out today so that we can understand the true state of the Queensland Police Service and the number of full-time frontline police officers that are on the beat right now. And without that information, it's going to be very difficult to have an informed debate about the solutions that are proposed in relation to the youth crime crisis. So it's on the Premier. Does the Premier want to show leadership? Does the Premier want to step up to the mark and be open and transparent, as she said 8 years ago? Or does she want to continue to hide? Does she want to continue to hide from Queenslanders when they deserve to see her leading from the front, demonstrating solutions, consulting, bringing Queenslanders along for the ride so that we can together work to solve this youth crime crisis? Because they're not seeing that now. I'll hand back to David.
Thank you, mate. Over to you. Well, that's for Queenslanders to mark. What I want to do is show that we as a political movement have reformed, we're energetic, we're hungry for victory, and we're hungry to serve. And the Premier was elected on a platform of being open and transparent, and they've moved a long way away from that. Our role is to show Queenslanders that we're there to serve them, continue to do as we have from opposition, which is not just point out the problems, but point out solutions. And next year, Queenslanders get their opportunity to cast judgment on her record.
The Premier should have, at this 8-year mark, more should have been done to curb youth crime, to stop the housing crisis. It's not looking great.
Well, the first time I stood before you all, I spoke about the issues that I would focus on. The economy, service delivery and integrity. And have a look at what's happened across the board. New taxes, despite many commitments not to, 26 times in fact. More regulation, less opportunities for small and family business. On service delivery, we have had a failing on every frontline metric that matters to Queenslanders. We are living through a health crisis, a law and order epidemic, and an inability for young people to get a roof over their head. And in integrity, well, where do we start? A government that's absolutely given up on it. And every time we've raised issues, we've been bullied, belittled. Whistleblowers have said they're making up stories. Every crisis that this government has overseen, they have said there isn't an issue. So it's up to the Premier to defend her record. What I need to do is show Queenslanders that there is a better way, and it's a way that will focus on making sure that they can afford to keep a roof over their head, there are opportunities for their kids, and that when they pick up a phone, there will be someone there to look after them. And whether that's an AMBO, a police officer, or any of the other services they rely on. And that'll always be my focus. Commentators can worry about her performance. I worry about Queenslanders.
What do you think about the idea of a colour-shaped statue?
Well, there's already a monument to the government. It's called Wellcamp, and it cost $220 million, and it never really got used. That's a legacy that the government won't want to talk about.
What do you make about Stephen Miles' comments that you think the Bar Association has come out and said they're inappropriate? Do you think they're appropriate or inappropriate?
Well, the Deputy Premier has to point to the laws that he was part of changing. And in recent times, the government has sought to blame everyone else but themselves, parents and police, and now it's the turn of the courts. It's the state government that sets legislation, and it's the state government that has to be accountable for that. But interestingly, in the last few days, at a time when Queenslanders need vision, we have seen a conga line of ministers lining up to have their own two bobs worth on it. We had the Treasurer throw the Deputy Premier under the bus, and then the Housing Minister tried to defend. I really don't know what to make of Minister Bailey's press conference today. There was a lot of points of views and viewpoints, but and in the end, none of them are talking about Queenslanders. Queenslanders want to see an end to the bloodletting in the Labor Party, and what they want to see is a focus on blood being spilt on the streets and the solution for that. But at the moment, it just seems that everything is about the politics of it. And I come back to the fact that we still haven't seen legislation that is going to be debated in this place in less than a week. Queenslanders, victims of crime, youth services, no one has been afforded the decency to see that legislation. That tells you everything you need to know about a government that has been there too long.
I understand your point, but on all of that, but do you think that criticism is appropriate or inappropriate? Do you agree or disagree with the Bar Association?
The government sets the laws of the day. If the government isn't happy with the laws, deal with them.
Do you think it's appropriate for the Deputy Premier to make those comments? Do you agree with the Bar Association?
Well, there has been a conga line of people lining up to explain how inappropriate Stephen Miles has been in conducting himself. What I want to do is focus on the solution to it, because a politician attacking a politician isn't going to advance the debate. How I want to advance the debate is to talk about two things. One is to fix the Youth Justice Act that this government broke in 2015, to restore consequences for action, and at the other end of the spectrum, how can we deal early on in a young person's intervention with crime to turn it around? Blaming parents and police and the courts isn't going to change a thing. And me doing what the Labor Party is doing in criticising Stephen Miles will take this focus off what we need to be debating, and that is fixing the broken Youth Justice Act. There are... Yeah. Sure. Sure. Governments reach a point in their cycle when they have been there too long, and sometimes that comes earlier. But normally the telltale sign is they start criticising other people for their failings, and we're living through that now.
You can't say yourself whether it's appropriate or inappropriate.
Well, highly inappropriate. Highly inappropriate. But I want to focus on what is going to happen in that building, because I don't want today's story to be one politician attacking another politician. That's what the Labor Party have spent the last 3 days doing. I want to focus on this clearly. Laws are set by members of Parliament. If you don't like the laws, fix them. But this government watered down the Youth Justice Act nearly 8 years ago. And on the back of it, there's a generation of repeat hardcore young offenders. So if you don't like the laws, fix it. But don't blame parents, don't blame police, don't blame the courts, fix the laws. But as for the Deputy Premier's comments, there are enough people lining up to say that the Deputy Premier is often a goose in what he says. I don't need to join that chorus. I need to focus on the things that Queenslanders are telling me. And right now, Queenslanders are telling me they are having conversations about whether or not to leave keys at the front door so that an intruder can take them and leave, or should they hide them and try and keep the possession that they've worked their backside off for. That is no debate. The debate that should be held in this place should be about fixing the laws that they broke, not blaming everyone else for it.
These crime forums that have been going on with Minister Ryan today on Cairns, tomorrow night in Toowoomba, is this just giving lip service to residents?
The Premier should go to Toowoomba and listen to the community. They're owed that, and I think that's the least she can do. That's already sold out, so there are going to be a whole heap of people who don't get their opportunity to have a say. I think for the Premier not to show up to that region after someone has innocently lost their life and a city is under siege shows a lack of leadership. And right now we are living through a failure of legislation and a failure of leadership. And a good leader would go to that community and listen. And that's what I did a few days ago. And I went there where Mr Brown passed away, and it's moving to see somebody who's waiting for a cab, and it's alleged that they've not only have they king hit him, but they lifted a backpack off his limp body as he lay there to die. That community is owed leadership and a change in legislation. It's not owed people criticising courts and police and all manner of things. If the government is serious about fixing this youth crime epidemic, they will listen, they will show their changes to legislation, they will allow Queenslanders to have their say. If they don't, and we turn up here on Tuesday, and that's the first time anyone gets to see that legislation, it'll tell you everything you need to know about a government in its third term that has been there too long and stopped listening to the people who put them there.
Just quickly to get on the Careers 8-year reign. As opposition leader, do you think there's anything that's gone through that's been a positive change for Queensland, or something that you think
Of course, and I've always been prepared to stand up and point out where I think things are done right. I did it in the last budget reply speech when I spoke about the opportunity to honour the Jewish community, for example. I'll always be prepared to do it, and if I see something that makes sense, I will be the first to say so. And I'm not going to stand here today and trash the Premier. What I am going to do is chart an alternate course for Queensland, and there is a better way, and Queenslanders are yearning for it. And right now, when I travel the state, I've never felt such a mood for change amongst Queenslanders who feel they're being let down. They're being let down every time they open their wallet. They're being let down every time they pick up the phone and need services. And they're being let down every time they see their politicians on the TV walking away from a promise to be open and transparent 8 years ago. And we're not going to walk away from that. And I'm not going to get into the mud, and I'm not going to throw stones. I'm just going to point out where things should be done better and chart an alternate course. And if we do that, I have every faith that Queenslanders will do the rest. Thanks all.